For the past half-century, American companies have led the way in technology and innovation, but the names you're likely to hear more about in the future are coming from China. So what's behind the rise of Chinese technology? Now on BBC World News, Talking Business Asia.
For the past half a century, American companies have led the way in technology and innovation. Think of the iPhone, Google, Facebook, and Amazon. But the names you're likely to hear about more in the future, well, they're coming from China. It's now home to some of the most technologically advanced and innovative companies in the world: Alibaba, Baidu, and Tencent. So what's behind the rise of Chinese technology? And how narrow is the innovation gap with the West? Because whoever controls technology controls the future. Welcome to Talking Business Asia. What do you think of when you hear the word technology, or artificial intelligence, or augmented reality? You're probably thinking about the future, and for the last several years, it's the US that's led that race. But there's a new player in town, and that's upsetting the old guards.
TikTok. Huawei.
We're looking at TikTok. We may be banning TikTok. We may be doing some other things. There are a couple of options.
To understand why the US and China are clashing, you've got to understand what's at stake. And that's who dominates over 5G technology, which will be the backbone of our autonomous future. Every G changed our lives in small but significant ways. It's all down to the speed in which you can access the net. In the old days of 3G networks, it could take as long as 5 minutes to download a simple picture. But today, the speed of 4G means you can watch movies online and make video calls on your smartphone. Hey, Derek. 4G is what most of us have on our phones these days, and this technology is largely controlled by Western corporations. But 5G? That's at least 10 times faster than what we have. And the Chinese are ahead in the 5G race. Their technology is thought to be faster, cheaper, and at least a year ahead of the competition. 5G connects and controls everything in entire cities. Think driverless cars to traffic signals, and even to remote surgeries. The list goes on. It's able to do this because it can carry and collect huge amounts of data. And that's what the US is worried about.
This is exactly what China wants. They want to divide Western alliances through bits and bytes, not bullets and bombs.
Washington says the data goes into the hands of the Chinese Communist Party. But Beijing says this whole fight isn't about national security at all. Rather, America's just jealous of China's tech supremacy. So, in the race for control of the future, will the two emerge as competitors or collaborators? My guest, the former Google CEO Eric Schmidt, who's currently chair of the US Department of Defense's Defense Innovation Advisory Board, has warned that it's already too late. China has soared well ahead of the US in key technologies like AI, and he says the US needs to claw back that territory right away. Dr. Schmidt, good to see you. How narrow is the innovation gap between the US and China right now in key technologies like AI?
We believe that the United States remains somewhat ahead of China, that China is investing very heavily in artificial intelligence for both good commercial reasons as well as national security reasons.
Has the US dropped the ball on technological innovation?
For my whole life, the United States has been the unquestioned leader of R&D. And it did so with significant research and development funding, 2% or so of the GDP of the country. Recently, the funding in research and development in the United States has fallen to a low. So it looks to me like America has dropped the ball in funding for basic research, and the other countries, including China, are beginning to make up that gap.
Where do you think that gap between the United States and China will narrow? In what technological areas and by when?
I would expect significant advances from Chinese researchers, Chinese companies. We also understand the Chinese model is somewhat different from the Western model. China has brutal internal competition. Once there's a strong winner and a clear winner in a network-based model, China becomes all about that company and becomes a strong proponent of that company globally. That model has worked well for a number of businesses, including Huawei and TikTok, for example, and I would expect it to work for more.
You mentioned TikTok and Huawei, but now the United States is considering banning these companies. Is that an effective strategy to contain Chinese tech, in your view?
I think the most interesting question to ask is what happens after such a ban is put in place by a country. In the case of the White House, it's made it very difficult for Huawei to purchase chips from American manufacturers and using American financing. The result, of course, will be that China will be even more likely to invest in its own domestic chip manufacturing. Similarly, with TikTok, there's an argument that that the United States should have data sovereignty, and that the data that is in TikTok should be in US firms and US hands. That will accelerate the arguments in favor of data sovereignty for many countries.
What is the risk of China leaping ahead of the United States? Why is the US so worried?
Well, today in the United States, the 5 most valuable companies on our stock exchange are also technology companies. And the United States has benefited enormously by the creation of the internet and by being the inventor of much of the software and hardware platforms that people use worldwide. We benefit in many ways. We also benefit because the values that the West cares about tend to seep into other countries that might not have the same values. It's possible that you could see larger businesses come out of China, and therefore they could get a hold earlier and become global faster.
How much of this is less about national security, in your view, the way the US government says it is, and more about the US's own insecurity as China grows in economic wealth?
Competition is going to continue. That the most important thing is that the Western countries that have, if you will, much of this, get their act together with additional funding and support from the government to build global platforms that are phenomenal. And I would say that if I were a Chinese citizen, I would probably say the same thing about my Chinese companies. So it's a competitive environment, possible to win it, it's possible to lose it. It's important to me for the economic and industrial system in America for it to be successful. I don't think we'll win all, but I think we can win many.
In your view, though, what must the US do to remain competitive and, in fact, be, power ahead of the Chinese, be the leader in this race?
The United States has maintained its leadership in artificial intelligence simply because it's been the place that people want to come to do AI research, including Canada, for quite some time. And the American model is essentially an immigration model where people come from many different countries. If you look at, we studied this question, the AI research, much of the AI research is done by foreign nationals who are students here in the United States. To me, it's crucial that the model that universities are using, where they have foreign graduate students, they get money from the government, they get money from private sector, a combination of all of that has produced enormous gains.
The US is going through a period right now where they're keeping people out. How is that going to damage the US's efforts in this area?
When you study the publications that have been award-winning, that have had the best impact in science recently, they often have a Chinese author or two. Not because in China, Chinese are better than anyone else, but because of the unique property that some of the smartest people in the world are coming to America to work on research. And that model has brought us the success we have today. This high skills immigration is crucial to American competitiveness, global competitiveness, building these new companies and so forth. America does not have enough people with those skills, those very specialized skills, which are largely medical, to fill it. We need these people. I don't agree with the current view on this matter in the government because I know from a fact that we need them in Silicon Valley.
We framed this discussion as a competition between the United States and China, but there are many people out there in the world who are saying, look, hey, why can't these two great powers just collaborate rather than compete?
The truth is that China is both our largest day-to-day partner and also our most important strategic competitor. So it's both. And so to me, the right strategy is what we call a rivalry partnership, where we understand that we're rivals, but we'll partner when we need to. And there are plenty of things to partner on. And when we're rivals, we are rough. We're pursuing things. We're competing hard. We're trying to get advantage, real competition, which the United States can do well and which China can do well. But there's also plenty of areas where we need to be partners. The most obvious ones being involving climate change and forms of security.
How likely a possibility is the picture that you've painted just now?
The current doctrine is only 2 years old. Before that, the rise of China was seen as net positive globally. And now with a change in leadership in China, a change in tone in China, the rise of nationalism in the West, all the various issues that we're all very well aware of, you see a different tone. But the fundamental point remains that we need to be able to collaborate with China while we also are competing with them.
Eric Schmidt, the former Google CEO there. Don't go away. We'll be right back when we'll look at some of the latest advances in Chinese technology and what that means for the rest of us.
In the world of business, everything is connected. From global hubs to places less traveled. The big stories to your bottom line. The path can be unpredictable. But with the right insights, you can see where the bend in the road will lead. Business on BBC News. Make the connection.
Join me, Zainab Badawi, for Global Questions, when we will be asking if Lebanon's political system is broken. A new transitional government is trying to lead the recovery after that tragic explosion in Beirut last month, but people are sceptical that they can bring about real change. That's on BBC World News.
Welcome back to Talking Business Asia. I'm Karishma Vaswani. We've been looking at the pace of Chinese innovation and why that's got the US worried. By 2030, China's leader Xi Jinping wants the country to achieve AI supremacy. China is now home to some of the most innovative companies on the planet. AI startup Rokid is an example of that innovation, but it's also one of hundreds, possibly thousands of smaller companies caught up in the clash between China and the US. Rokid manufactures smart glasses, which can be used in factories to conduct inspections, for remote working and video calls, in museums as a way to tell audiences what they're looking at, and the glasses can also scan temperatures of people in public places, one of the key applications that's helped the Chinese startup gain customers from more than 35 countries during the pandemic. But are there worries over the misuse of this technology? That's a question I put to the company's CEO and founder, Zhu Mingming.
We know that people just be scared by some new technology because they are so afraid to, be watched by the new technology. So that's why we designed this product work perfectly offline. So you can use this product totally offline. You don't have to connect to the internet. And that means we cannot get any data from any one of you.
Give us a sense of how far along Chinese technology has come in the time that you've been working in this industry.
All over the world, we are now talking about the Chinese company that we're now working harder on like a chipset design, on like operating system, and some like fundamental technology research. So I think we know that Chinese government and the Chinese companies, we know we have to working really hard on like fundamental technology research. Because what I can say is, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. So we have to get ready for the worst situation.
How much are the US-China tensions having an impact on your ability to expand overseas?
I think it's totally unfair to the Chinese high-tech company. Because we're just like a technology company like the rest of the other companies in the world. So all we want to do is just, making good product and good services to the people. So we are not evil company. We don't want to control the data. We don't want to get data from Northview, and so we just, like the rest of companies in the world, we just want to make a good product. So don't be afraid.
Do you also see why people are so afraid? Because ultimately, the Chinese Communist Party makes the laws in China. It has a law that controls data. From a corporate perspective, does that ever worry you?
Every country, they have their own law to try to get some data from the technical company, even in the States. But I think it's just for some few sensitive companies, not all of them. Most of the company like Rocket, we're just like a regular company. We just want to do a regular high-tech stuff. We don't want take any data from the people and give it to the government. We don't want to do that.
Where do you see the potential for AI and AR in the next 5 to 10 years? And who do you think's going to lead in that race, the US or China?
Nobody. It's all lose war. Nobody is the winner in the future if we keep in doing the things like today that we're doing right now. So I think globalization is the right way, and today we're now working on the wrong way. I mean, we want this situation finished as soon as possible.
Zhu Mingming of Rokid there. So, as you've heard, there are lots of challenges for Chinese tech firms trying to operate in a global environment where the US has focused such scrutiny on them. Huawei, TikTok, Tencent, they're just a few of the big Chinese tech firms that have been caught in the crosshairs of the US-China tech war. But Chinese tech companies are also attracting huge amounts of interest and capital from American investors. So is there a way for the US and China to collaborate rather than compete in this space? Or is this more about commercial interests rather than ideological differences? To discuss this, I'm joined by Robert Spalding, a retired US general who helped the Trump administration form its strategy on China and national security, and Edith Young, general partner with Race Capital, a venture capitalist and a China internet expert. Good to see the both of you. General, let's start with you. You say that China is leading a stealth war in pursuit of global domination, and that's why we need to keep Chinese tech firms out of the United States. Where's the evidence for that?
The Chinese Communist Party controls the banks, the police, the borders, the military. It controls all the levers of power in the country, and it uses that to incentivize or coerce, nearly everybody and every company to do exactly what the Chinese Communist Party want. And when I say the Chinese Communist Party, I really mean Chinese companies who filter that data through the Chinese Communist Party propaganda arm and the People's Liberation Intelligence arm.
Well, I think the world loves to pit the United States against China, against each other. With a lot of things going on, regardless of Huawei or TikTok, both of these companies is taking the US government and the White House to court with the hope that there's the rule of law. The key thing, I think, the world, not just Chinese, wanted to see the US set a great example for the rest of the world in terms of how you regulate the internet.
How much of the anti-China rhetoric these days from the United States is finding a convenient bad guy for the lack of American innovation in tech over the last few years?
Well, I think it's less a failure of American technology than it is a failure for the American political system to recognize the power of that technology. I freely admit that the Chinese Communist Party recognized the power of data and the globalized economy to influence people beyond their borders. Now, if it would be fine if the principles and values, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from fear, freedom from want, were the values and principles that the Chinese Communist Party wanted to spread and support worldwide. They're not.
Edith, you've worked with a lot of these Chinese tech firms. You know the startups, you're investing in them. What can you tell us about what they're doing on the ground and how much of that matches up to the picture that the general's painting?
Of course, I agree with the general that Chinese government really like control. But the mindset of the Chinese company is that they wanted to do business and they are publicly traded in the US, and they understand that wherever they go, they need to follow the local rules and regulations. And vice versa, I think that a lot of the American companies really want to operate in China. I'm not saying China is an easy place to work, and there's a lot of cultural differences, but I think in general, right now, like Chinese companies have a very, very tough time operating in the US. Chinese investors have a very tough time to invest in US. So a lot of my friends, which is early stage in technology, their spirit is just like most of the Silicon Valley folks, and they want to build great product, and they want to come to the US. But guess what? I think TikTok pretty much the only one. I don't see any of the internet giants even have any traction in US at all.
So, General, you say that the US is this bastion of free enterprise, that it has to uphold these democratic values. But these Chinese companies are just trying to do business in the United States.
What's happening in America and what is going on with the national security strategy is we've said enough is enough. If the Chinese Communist Party doesn't want to operate according to free trade, if they don't want to promote the principles and norms of the international order, then they're not going to have access to the United States.
Surely, General, this is a form of corporate bullying.
Well, no, it's a form of protecting the American people. And I would assume that other free countries would want to protect their people as well.
I'd like to ask the two of you, who, in your view, is winning the tech race right now, the US or China? Edith?
China is very, very far away, at least 5 or 10 years, maybe even more behind. So in that sense, US is still definitely leading in the semiconductor space. China, for good or bad, in terms of, because data is oil, in terms of artificial intelligence, because there is so much data involved, therefore is in many sense in the AI security is definitely leading, have very much to do with just the two countries have very different policy in terms of data.
I totally agree. I think certainly China is behind in semiconductors, but I think they're definitely moving out ahead in artificial intelligence. So, I think the fact of the matter is the United States has a lot of culpability in not investing in its science and technology, not investing in its infrastructure, not investing in its manufacturing, and we have a lot of work to do. And I'm hopeful that in the next 10, 20 years that's what we're going to do.
How do the two of you see this ending? Is there the possibility for the US and China to collaborate rather than compete in the way that we're seeing them do now?
I can absolutely see there's a lot of collaboration, regardless is AI, healthcare, biotech. There is so much like fundamental technology that really will enhance human race. It's not American versus Chinese. It's really about how do actually we protect the country, and we really need these fundamental technology to help and protect our citizens, and that's why we need to collaborate.
We are going to continue to decouple, and that's going to force the world to resolve into a bipolar world, much like during the first Cold War. That is what's coming. That is what we will see a continuing acceleration of, and I think it's absolutely necessary until we see the Chinese Communist Party understand that it can't get its way certainly in the United States or in other allied or partner nations.
Thank you, Brigadier General Robert Spalding and Edith Young of Race Capital. So, as you've heard, this is a battle that will continue. It's not going to end anytime soon. It's telling that technology that's meant to connect us is now dividing us. Well, that brings us to the end of our program. If you have any questions or comments, send them to me at BBC Karishma. From me and the rest of the team, thanks for watching. See you next time.